media's coverage.
That's right. All three major network newscasts made no mention of it last night.
And now one lawyer is calling the trial an attack on Hispanic Americans. Joining us now to discuss this is Harvard Law School professor and the author of that book right there, Trumped Up: How Criminalization of Political Differences Endangers Democracy, Dr. Alan Dershowitz. Dr. Dershowitz, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So we're talking about this trial, and just to give folks a background, you have this senator for 12 years in New Jersey. He has a friend down in Florida he's doing favors for him. He's claiming it was a friendship, so that's what friends do. But the government is putting him, he's in court now for corruption, correct?
Yes, but one thing we know for sure, this case will not end with a trial. We'll go to appeal because many of these cases result in initial convictions and are then reversed on appeal because the law regarding corruption and what you need to get in return for what you give is very unclear and is in a state of flux. So this case won't be over unless the jury renders an acquittal. If it renders a conviction, this case is going probably all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. But the Republican National Committee is already putting pressure on Menendez to resign if he's convicted. So this is yet another example, in my view, of the criminalization of political differences. Now, I don't know whether he's guilty or innocent. The jury will determine that. But we know that the Republican National Committee is trying to turn this into a political advantage, because if he does resign, immediately his replacement is named by the Republican governor.
Right.
But if he waits until after his appeal is over, then the replacement may be done by a Democratic governor who may be elected. So politics is deeply involved in this case.
All right. Meanwhile, the judge was very clear yesterday, Dr. Dershowitz. He said, don't turn this into a tabloid trial, because Mr. Menendez, the senator's co-defendant, his attorney said this trial is an attack on Hispanic Americans. And we've got a clip, or rather, we've got a verbatim of what he said. He said their idea was to pay it forward, help young Hispanic Americans improve their lives, lift up their community. This case isn't only an attack on those two men, it's an attack on that whole group. What do you make of that observation?
Well, I think it's a mistake to focus on ethnicity. I think the better tactic for the defendant would be to focus on the political implications of this. I think when you make a charge of it being ethnic discrimination, you really have to have a great deal to back it up, and I don't see the evidence to back that up. I do think that they would have a much, much better case if they said, look, this is business as usual. Senators get gifts all the time. Senators help their friends. This is about friendship. It's not about a quid pro quo. That would be a much, much better defense, both for the trial and for appellate purposes.
Well, it does come down to corruption, and if this were a Republican involved in a corruption trial, wouldn't the mainstream media be covering it? Yesterday was day 2 of this trial, and the mainstream media didn't even cover it last night on the newscast.
Well, the mainstream media should cover every trial involving a public figure. I have no doubt about that. And whether or not the mainstream media is favoring Menendez because he's a Democrat or Republican, I don't know. But I think the public has a great interest in making sure that its senators and public officials are not corrupt. But I think we also have to make sure that the laws regarding corruption are clear. Otherwise, we can see this phenomenon that I write about in my book, the criminalization of political differences. When you have a law like corruption, which is so elastic, you can stretch it to fit your political enemies. Today it's used against the Democrat. Tomorrow it's used against the Republican. Look, the same kind of elasticity is being used against President Trump. People are saying he obstructed justice, he was corrupt, he had corrupt intentions. We need laws that are crystal clear, particularly when they apply to controversial political figures. Otherwise, too much discretion is placed in the hand of prosecutors to decide who to prosecute and who not to, when conduct is committed that is fairly common among elected officials. It's tragic that it's so common, but it is common.